My sweet, stubborn, loud little baby who saved me without even knowing it. If you are one of those people who came here and are going to disrespect my feelings and my emotional pain, you can leave the video. Listen to this. This is serious and true. Betrayal begins before the first kiss. It begins with the first lies. It begins long before going to bed. That's right. If you're one of those who only came here to find out if there is betrayal or not, you can leave the video because I've already given you the spoiler and that's it. You know now. If you're one of those who thinks these stories are funny or for your fantasies of hearing about the relationship of two women, that there's nothing wrong with having a destroyed family, regardless of whether we're gay or straight, remember that couples are separating, loves are falling apart, and families are being destroyed. So you can leave because this is a serious story. But if you want to know the truth, want to hear a shocking story, and will respect my feelings, I'll tell you. I never thought a tiny flash of metal inside my parrot's stomach would be the thing that shattered my entire life. But that's how it happened. Not through a text message, not through lipstick on a collar, not through whispers or neighbors or a friend who saw something. It was my parrot. My sweet, stubborn, loud little baby who saved me without even knowing it. My name is Susan, and for 4 years, Jenny and I built a life together in our sun-filled apartment in Santa Monica. We had soft routines, morning coffee on the balcony, weekend grocery runs, movie nights, and our parrot Kiko filling every corner of our home with chaos, feathers, and laughter. He was part of us, a piece of our family woven into every daily moment. But lately, something had been wrong. With Jenny. With us. The excuses had been piling up like small stones I kept stepping over. The team invited me out for dinner. I'll sleep at a coworker's place because it's late. My car broke down, but it's fine. A friend helped. Work is stressful. You're imagining things. Every lie came wrapped in a smile, softened by a kiss on the forehead, smoothed by her gentle hands. And because I loved her, because I believed in who she was, I kept choosing trust over doubt. Then I traveled for 5 days. Just a simple work trip. We joked about it, she teased me about souvenirs, and I left our home feeling safe, naive, whole. But when I returned, Kiko wasn't himself. He wasn't screaming for treats, he wasn't pacing or whittling my hair. He just sat there, weak, puffed up, eyes half closed. I panicked. Jenny brushed it off, saying he always eats random stuff, but my gut told me something was wrong. We rushed him to the emergency vet, and I'll never forget that cold room, the sharp disinfectant smell, the x-ray screen glowing with a blurry shape inside his stomach. The vet frowned and said there was something metallic there, that they needed to operate immediately, 2 or maybe 3 hours before it became fatal. My heart dropped. We signed the papers. Jenny said she needed to run home to receive the delivery of our new 85-inch TV, the one we saved months for. So I stayed alone, waiting, praying, shaking. When the surgery ended, the vet walked toward me holding a small sealed dish and chuckled, saying we must have been looking for this and that the engraving was cute. Jenny forever. I blinked. My ring was on my hand. The only engraved ring we had ever owned was our wedding band. I told him that. He looked confused, laughed awkwardly, shrugged, and handed it to me anyway. For the next 40 minutes, I sat in that plastic chair, staring at the white gold ring, turning it between my fingers, feeling something inside me crack open even though they didn't yet understand why. And then Jenny walked in. One look at my face, at the ring in my hand, and her smile died. Her body froze, her eyes widened, all the color drained from her skin. That was the moment I knew. Before she spoke, before she stuttered, before the excuses poured out again like broken glass, her body told me the truth. And the truth was terrifying. When Jenny stepped into the room and saw me holding that white gold ring, something inside her snapped in a way no lie could hide. Her shoulders stiffened, her breath hitched, her eyes darted between my face and the small metal circle resting in my palm. And in that instant, I realized the truth had been living inside her far longer than I wanted to admit. She tried to smile, to pretend nothing was wrong, but her lips trembled, and that was all it took for my chest to tighten and my stomach to twist.
I stood there quietly while she launched into a flurry of explanations that clashed against each other like waves in a storm, and every sentence contradicted the one before. And the more she spoke, the more my heart sank, because I wasn't listening to her words anymore. I was watching her body betray her. The shaky hands, the restless eyes, the trembling voice, the pale face, everything screamed guilt, even if her mouth kept denying it. I lowered my head and felt the first tear roll down my cheek, falling on the vet's clean floor, soft but loud inside my mind. She reached out like she wanted to hold me, but I stepped back, not in anger, but in shock, confusion, heartbreak. I told her to stop talking, to stop inventing stories, to stop drowning the air with excuses that neither of us believed. I begged her to tell me only the truth, but she inhaled sharply and began another attempt to rewrite the moment. Her voice shaking, her hands clutching her hair, pulling at her shirt, pacing in small, nervous steps like a trapped animal. I interrupted her again and repeated the same request, the truth, just the truth, because while her mouth was trying to survive this moment, her body had already confessed everything, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. For 2 years, I'd watched her change piece by piece. The way she encouraged my work trips, the way she turned down a promotion she had dreamed about, the way she detached from me slowly, silently, strategically. And I remembered all of that at once, like a film reel snacking into place. I remember donating my bone marrow to her when her family refused to help her because they couldn't accept who we were together. I remember holding her after surgeries, cheering for her successes, shielding her from cruel comments, loving her with everything inside me. And now, here I was, holding a ring that wasn't mine, while she stared at me like a child caught stealing something sacred. The vet suddenly stepped into the hallway and gently reminded us that Kiko needed to stay overnight for observation, and Jenny nodded quickly, relieved for the interruption, as if those few seconds could erase what was happening between us. We left the clinic in silence, the kind of silence so heavy it feels like a third person sitting in the car with you, watching, waiting, judging. And when we got home, I rushed to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, looked in the mirror, and tried to recognize myself. Tried to breathe, tried to remember that I was strong enough to survive whatever this was. When I walked out, she pretended nothing was wrong, asking for dinner or something pointless, her voice unbearably normal, and the absurdity of that broke something inside me. I cut her off with a cracking voice, as if each word scraped my throat, asking again what was happening and telling her I wasn't stupid. And that was when her facade finally broke. Her shoulders fell, her face collapsed, and while she walked in circles trying to find courage, I felt the truth rising between us like a tide we could no longer outrun. She finally stopped pacing and leaned against the counter with both hands like her knees might give out, her chest rising fast, her eyes fixed on the floor. In that split second of stillness, I knew the truth was about to come out whether she wanted it or not. She whispered that everything started as jokes at work. Stupid, harmless jokes. Little comments, little smiles, little playful nudges from her supervisor, Megan, a married woman with 2 children and a reputation for treating everyone like they were special. And Jenny insisted it was nothing at first, just a co-worker being overly friendly, but then she covered for the secretary during those 2 long weeks, and the proximity changed the tone of things. Megan brought her chocolates on days she had cramps, left silly little sticky notes on her desk, touched her shoulder when passing behind her chair. Subtle but deliberate. Jenny said she kept reminding her she was married, that she had a wife, that she loved me, but Megan kept pushing past those boundaries, reminding Jenny that her own marriage was falling apart, that her husband cheated on her, that she felt alone, that she felt invisible. And somewhere in that emotional mess, Jenny let her guard drop. I stood there, trying to absorb every detail while feeling my pulse hammer against my skin like my body wanted to escape itself. Jenny said nothing physical happened at first, only tension, glances, long conversations behind closed doors, small secrets disguised as inside jokes. But then came the second request to work in Megan's office, no longer temporary this time, a permanent offer dressed up as a favor. And Jenny knew she should have refused, but she didn't.
She told me she liked the attention, liked feeling wanted, liked feeling seen. And hearing that twisted something sharp inside me because I had spent years giving her exactly that, but I guess I wasn't enough when the thrill of something forbidden presented itself like a shiny apple in someone's hand. Jenny admitted the first real lie she told me happened on a Tuesday night when she said she had dinner with coworkers, but actually ended up at Megan's house under the excuse of grabbing food. I felt my throat close, and the memory of those days hit me like a wave because I remembered calling her that night. I remembered her churl voice, relaxed, casual, rehearsed. I remembered believing her without hesitation. Jenny said things escalated over weeks, late-night chats on the company phone, playful texts that turned into emotional confessions, then into inappropriate flirting. She swore it took a long time before anything physical happened, but honestly, that didn't matter to me anymore. Betrayal begins long before lips ever touch, and I could feel myself slipping into that hollow numbness reserved for people who realize their life was slowly rewritten behind their back. Then she admitted the worst part. The part that made my stomach turn and my hands go cold. She slept at Megan's house. Not once, but twice. Both times while I was traveling, both times leaving our pet alone with old food and still water because she couldn't risk coming home and having to explain why she smelled like someone else. When she said that, I felt a rush of heat in my face. Not anger, just heartbreak. Exhaustion, disbelief, years of love collapsing in a single exhale. And she sat on the couch looking small, terrified, waiting for me to scream, waiting for me to throw something or fall apart completely. But I didn't. I just stood there with my arms at my sides, holding the weight of every broken promise she had ever whispered to me in the dark. I sat there for hours, the heavy white gold ring in my hand, watching Jenny shrink on the sofa, her hands restless on the hem of her blouse, her eyes darting away whenever they met mine, and I could feel the walls of our house closing in as if the very air had turned dense and unbearable. I wanted to scream, shake her until the truth came out, but I also felt a strange and cruel restraint. A part of me that wanted to see her slowly unravel, let her body confess the betrayal that words tried to hide. I remembered Kiko at the vet, fragile and quiet, as if he sensed what was coming, and my mind raced, connecting dots I didn't want to see. The strange smells, the strange nights, the small inconsistencies in her stories, the way she insisted she was fine with my trips, while somehow orchestrating her own escapes. I let out a trembling sigh, trying to compose myself, my hand still clutching the ring as if it were a lifeline, a witness, proof of something. The sacred being violated? Jenny began to speak again, hesitant, this time softer, almost pleading, explaining that Megan had insisted that at first it was flattery, small gestures, small gifts, chocolates on difficult days, subtle touches, nothing violent, nothing explicitly sexual, but each a guiding thread. And she admitted, her voice trembling, that she allowed herself to enjoy being noticed, being desired, and that one night, the night I was away, she went to dinner at Megan's house pretending to be with colleagues. She had told me she was going out with the team, but instead stayed there, sat in Megan's kitchen, while Megan laughed at something trivial, their knees touching under the table at first as a natural and unintentional occurrence, but which then continued with caresses under the table, knees brushing continuously. Jenny told herself it was harmless, just attention, just connection and affection, but she lied to me. She knew it was more than that. And then the confessions kept coming. The late night messages that started as jokes, then became confessions, then flirting, then physical closeness. Jenny admitted it slowly, her face pale, her eyes teary. She spent 2 nights at Megan's house while I was traveling, and then I deduced that she didn't tell anyone. If she didn't tell her own aunt who lives near our house, since that would generate questions and comments and it would be discovered that she slept away from home, then she left our baby alone. Imagine me traveling, her sleeping at another woman's house for 2 days without leaving, and leaving Kiko alone, neglected, with old food or hungry, with stagnant water that could get him sick while she's enjoying her time with her beloved boss. My stomach churned at the mere thought of our little bird suffering because of this human's betrayal. Even so, I held back
from screaming, from crying, from completely collapsing because a part of me needed to understand, to let her explain each step, each moment that led to this breach of trust. But I can say that this quickly destroys the feeling we've built over time. I could see the guilt burning in her face, but also the relief. A paradox I couldn't control. She spoke about the following weeks, about little secrets, secret meetings, stolen moments in offices when no one was looking, about messages that started out playful but became intimate, about the tension she felt, the thrill of the forbidden. And I listened, my heart breaking with every word, realizing that the betrayal hadn't been one night, one kiss, one decision. It had been a slow erosion, a constant surrender to curiosity and the dangerous allure of another person's attention. I felt anger, yes, but deeper than that, there was a raw, a profound emptiness, a pain, a grief that penetrated every corner of my being. I thought about the life we had built, our mornings, our routines, our small joys, the bone marrow donation, the shared recovery from surgeries, the trust and love that had accumulated over the years. And now I held a symbol of that love that had been reflected in the hands of another person, a cruel echo of our vows. Jenny was sitting there waiting for me to explode, waiting for me to crumble completely, and I did something neither of us expected. I just kept watching, letting the silence speak louder than words, letting her body confess everything the lies tried to hide, and I realized that sometimes the most devastating truths are not revealed in screams or confrontations, but in the way someone freezes, and the way their face changes when faced with evidence too real to deny. Jenny's shoulders slumped even further, but there was no escape, no flimsy excuse that could undo the emotional damage she had caused. I looked again at the white gold ring, the one inscribed Jenny Forever, as if it was hard to believe even after hearing all that. I showed her the ring, asking, How? How did you get to this point? I watched her face lose color again, the guilt in her eyes undeniable. Then she lowered her head and began to elaborate. At that moment, she was looking at the floor, but it was as if she was looking at a mirror reflecting her own betrayal. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse. I just waited for her to speak, to offer the truth I demanded. And finally, with trembling lips, she whispered, stammered, remembered, and tried to explain each word. Entangled in fear, but everything gradually came to light. She admitted the affair with Megan began as a game.
Whispers that hid behind a facade of friendship. And I realized that each moment was a careful construction of deception. Jenny admitted that she felt conflicted, guilty, but at the same time excited by the attention and someone else desiring her. This brought the thrill of being observed, of being beautiful, of being attractive. And this painful honesty hit me hard because I saw the trail of destruction I had left. Or maybe I didn't pay attention, didn't make her feel desired. And I started to blame myself for this happening. Maybe that's her goal. Maybe she wants to lessen her mistake by projecting it onto me. I only know that at that moment, so many different things were going through our heads. I was confused but remained silent, just listening. Each sigh carried regret and fear. Then Jenny spoke of the nights I spent traveling, how Megan would invite her to stay late at the office or at her house and not come back, and how she, blinded by the desire to be seen, accepted at the perfect moment when I was traveling and Megan's husband was too. He also traveled a lot, often alone with the children, and she said she was afraid to sleep alone. So Jenny was Megan's refuge now, the one who protected her in her husband's absence, allowing our routines to be broken, our trust violated, as if we were two young and irresponsible teenagers who didn't understand the seriousness of building a family. I wasn't hungry and couldn't eat. I just drank the coffee, and with each sentence Jenny finished, another sip of coffee was necessary to swallow that filth, to swallow that pain. And as she spoke, I remembered each phone call, each apology, each smile that now had a different meaning. Jenny said she never planned to hurt Kiko, but she knew it would devastate me. And I felt a pang in my chest imagining our little family being ignored. Then came the cruelest part. She explained that Megan had started including Clara, the assistant, observing everything, noting schedules, suggesting opportunities, turning each encounter into an emotional trap. Jenny trembled as she spoke, her head bowed, just staring at the table. I realized that guilt and fear were mixed with the memory of forbidden pleasure, a devastating combination. As much as I wanted to scream, run, punch something, my mind started working, thinking about what to do next,
how to regain control of our lives, protect Kiko, and still understand Jenny, understand what made her give in, where I failed to perceive the emptiness she was trying to fill outside the home. I needed answers. I needed clarity. So I asked about Megan, about Clara, about every seemingly harmless gesture. Jenny answered hesitantly, detailing each touch, each message, each look. And as the confession unfolded, as it continued, a strange feeling arose. Despite the pain, there was relief in finally knowing the whole truth. And Kiko, perched near the window, chirped softly, as if he understood that this was the human storm we needed to face. And at that moment, I realized that he, our little guardian, had saved not only me, but had forced us to face reality before the poison of lies corroded everything. And even though my heart was broken, even though trust was shattered, I knew I needed to make a decision. I needed to choose whether we would rebuild something or go our separate ways. Because the truth, however painful, was now clear, undeniable, and each word from Jenny was a brick in that invisible wall between us. And while I cried silently and held the ring in my hand, thinking that that cold metal contained more truth than any conversation could reveal, and that love, even betrayed, could still be confronted, understood, and perhaps one day transformed. The silence after Jenny's confession wasn't just a pause between words. It was a weight that spread through the furniture, the pictures on the wall, the floor, where I felt my feet too firm for someone about to crumble. And while she wiped away her tears with the sleeve of that green t-shirt, I realized something was still missing. A piece she held onto with fear, perhaps shame, perhaps the fear that I wouldn't be able to bear hearing it. So I asked one last time if there was more, if everything had really been said, and she remained motionless, as if the air around her had turned to stone. Until she finally confessed that Megan hadn't been a passing diversion, but a constant presence, someone who had carefully infiltrated our routine, like someone planting a poisonous seed, hoping no one would notice until it's too late. Jenny admitted that Megan made her believe I was distant, too busy, too cold, and I felt a blow to my chest because I knew it wasn't true. But I also realized that perhaps I had given her room to doubt me, and that was harder to face than the betrayal itself. At that moment, Kiko approached the room, jumping onto the back of the sofa with the same attentive look he always had when something important happened, as if he understood that the world he knew had turned upside down. And I instinctively ran my hand over his legs, seeking a piece of calm, while trying to organize the chaos in my head. And then I looked at Jenny, who was still trembling, and asked, why did she let Megan become so intimate, so present? Why did she allow Clara to be part of this secret charade? And the answer came as a broken whisper. She said that she felt seen, desired, and that she confused this attention with love, with care, that she deluded herself into believing that someone from the outside understood her more than I did, but that now she realized that it was all just calculated manipulation, something she mixed with neediness and ended up believing to be real. I took a deep breath, feeling the anger burning inside, but I kept my voice firm and direct, because at that moment it wasn't just about betrayal, but about rebuilding, about deciding if that relationship was capable of surviving the impact of the truth. And Jenny looked at me with red and sincere eyes, saying that she deeply regrets it, that she doesn't want to lose our life, our history, Kiko, everything we've built, and that she's willing to face any consequence, to cut all ties with Megan and Clara, to start over from scratch if I allowed it. But I knew that words are easy, promises are fragile, and decisions made in the midst of guilt have little value. So I asked for space, said I needed time to breathe without her presence contaminating my thoughts, and that's when she offered to leave for a few days, go to her sister's house, leave the apartment in peace. And despite the pain that caused me, I agreed, because I needed to hear myself before I heard her. I needed to understand if love had enough strength to withstand what I had just discovered. Jenny got up slowly, picked up a small suitcase and put in some clothes, while I watched everything in silence, following her every gesture as if I was watching the end of something big. And Kiko, restless, flew from one corner to another as if he wanted to prevent the temporary separation, but at the same time respected it, landing near the door when she finally left, and the apartment, as soon as the doorknob turned for the last time, felt heavier than ever. And in that instant, alone with Kiko and with the truth laid bare, I felt that the next step would decide our story, because the pain was deep, but there was also a small flame of lucidity being born, something that told me that before rebuilding anything with Jenny, I would need to rebuild myself, understand my limits, my wounds, my strength, and that perhaps for the first time in a long time, I was about to make a decision that would change everything. The house seemed bigger when Jenny left, as if the walls had receded a few centimeters to remind me of the empty space that now existed between us. Kiko landed on the arm of the sofa and tilted his head with that look that only he had, a mixture of curiosity and concern, as if he understood that the world he knew had turned upside down. And I felt a pang of guilt for not being able to give him the stability I always gave him. I walked around the room, avoiding looking at the objects that reminded me of Jenny. The blue mug on the table, the coat hanging on the hook, the blanket fallen in the corner, because each detail was a small electric shock in my chest, and I knew that if I allowed myself to feel everything at once, I would crumble. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to take a deep breath, but the breath came out short, trapped as if it were being filtered by a sadness too dense to allow oxygen. So I went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator without knowing what I was looking for, maybe a piece of normality hidden among the glass jars, but everything seemed tasteless, out of place. Kiko flew to the counter, pecking at the edge of an apple as if it were the most natural gesture in the world, and for a second that behavior brought a half smile to my face, the first since everything fell apart. And it was strange to realize that even in the chaos, there was still room for a sliver of life. I decided to take a shower. Not to clean myself, but to try to wash away the emotional weight that seemed stuck to my skin. And I let the hot water run down my back until my skin turned red. While the water ran, I mentally replayed the conversation with Jenny. Every word, every pause, every broken look she gave me, and the question I was trying to avoid returned with overwhelming force. Is there a version of the future where I still trust her? The answer didn't come. Silence was the only firm thing. After the shower, I walked to the bedroom, sat on the bed still with the towel on my body, and stared at the half-open wardrobe. Some of her belongings were still there, hanging like ghosts of routine, and something inside me immediately rejected the idea of taking them down. It wasn't pride, nor attachment, it was survival. I knew that any abrupt change, any symbolic gesture of definitive rupture at that moment could push me into an emotional abyss from which I might not be able to escape so quickly. So I closed the closet, got dressed, and forced myself to leave the house. I needed to breathe real air, not that air saturated with memories. I grabbed the keys, put Kiko in the travel perch, he hated it, but he needed it, and we left. The cold night air hit my face like a warning, as if the universe were telling me that I still existed beyond the pain. I walked to the park near my house. A journey that had seemed short before, but now seemed endless, as if the ground were stretching with each step. In the park, I sat on the bench near the fallen tree that always served as a landmark, and Kiko sat on my shoulder, calm, attentive, breathing with me. I stayed there for silent minutes that seemed like hours, listening to the distant sounds of laughter, footsteps, cars, and I realized how much that contrasted with the deafening silence inside me. And it was there, on that simple bench, that an uncomfortable truth began to slowly take shape. I wasn't just hurt by the betrayal. I was hurt by the fact that Jenny allowed someone to narrate my absence. Because Megan didn't just seduce Jenny, she occupied a space that should have been mine, and Jenny believed that narrative, believed that I was less present, less attentive, less warm. That hurt more than any hidden kiss. As this thought took hold, I heard light footsteps behind me, and reflexively turned around. It was the new neighbor, the woman who had moved into the building next door weeks before, always accompanied by her noisy dog. She approached slowly, perhaps noticing my state, and asked if everything was all right. I almost said yes, because that's what we say reflexively and to avoid questions, but this time I didn't have the energy for social lies. I just nodded silently. She didn't insist, but sat on a nearby bench, allowing company without intruding. A simple, human, rare gesture. Kiko chirped softly as if approving her presence, and for the first time that night I felt that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to face everything completely alone. We stayed there for silent minutes that seemed like hours, listening to the distant sounds of laughter, footsteps, cars, and I realized how much that contrasted with the deafening silence inside me. And it was there, on that simple bench, that an uncomfortable truth began to slowly take shape. I wasn't just hurt by the betrayal. I was hurt by the fact that Jenny allowed someone to narrate my absence. Because Megan didn't just seduce Jenny, she occupied a space that should have been mine, and Jenny believed that narrative, believed that I was less present, less attentive, less warm. That hurt more than any hidden kiss. As this thought took hold, I heard light footsteps behind me and reflexively turned around. It was the new neighbor, the woman who had moved into the building next door weeks before, always accompanied by her noisy dog. She approached slowly, perhaps noticing my state, and asked if everything was all right. I almost said yes, because that's what we say reflexively and to avoid questions, but this time I didn't have the energy for social lies. I just nodded silently. She didn't insist, but sat on a nearby bench, allowing company without intruding. A simple, human, rare gesture. Kiko chirped softly, as if approving her presence, and for the first time that night I felt that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to face everything completely alone. We stayed there for a few minutes, no one said anything, but that shared silence made something inside me realign a little, as if an internal peace had returned to its right place. When I finally got up to leave, she just smiled gently, like someone who understands that sometimes people just need to exist in the same space. I went home with Kiko, already asleep on my shoulder, and when I entered, the apartment still carried Jenny's echo, but it no longer seemed so suffocating. The pain was there, deep, latent, but there was a small space of air between it and my heart, enough space to realize that I wasn't broken yet. Not completely. In fact, I had been loving this woman for years, and then suddenly I find out that she's been deceiving me for months, lying to me for months, and in a relationship with someone else, with a ring and everything. And it was in that space that I decided the next day would be different. Not better, not easier, just different. And sometimes that's enough to get started. I woke up before the sun, not because I was rested, but because my body had seemed to forgotten how to sleep peacefully. Kiko was still huddled on his perch, feathers slightly ruffled, breathing slowly in a way that always reassured me. And for a moment, I just watched him, trying to remember that something in the world still existed without asking anything of me. The house didn't share that gentleness. It carried the scent of absence and a silence that came not from calm, but from expectation. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the weight of the previous night settling on me like a damp blanket. The betrayal had stopped being a shock and had become a presence, a shadow that followed me from room to room. I knew I would eventually have to face the practical side of it. Talking to Jenny, deciding whether she would return for her things, and figuring out what to do with the remnants of what we still shared. Bills, plans, promises, memories. But the conversation wasn't what scared me. What terrified me was knowing that nothing we said would change the fact that trust had been broken. I got up, went to the kitchen, and made coffee automatically, repeating old habits as if they might bring life back to its old shape, but nothing did. Everything that once belonged to us now felt like it belonged only to me. I set the mug down, took a deep breath, and decided I needed air again. But this time, I needed movement. I put on a thin jacket, placed Kiko in his travel perch. He hated it, but he needed it. And we left. The cold night air hit my face like a warning, as if the universe were telling me that I still existed beyond the pain. I walked to the park near my house, a journey that had seemed short before, but now seemed endless, as if the ground were stretching with each step. In the park, I sat on a bench near the fallen tree that always served as a landmark, and Kiko sat on my shoulder, calm, attentive, breathing with me. I stayed there for silent minutes that seemed like hours, listening to the distant sounds of laughter, footsteps, cars, and I realized how much that contrasted with the deafening silence inside me. And it was there, on that simple bench, that an uncomfortable truth began to slowly take shape. I wasn't just hurt by the betrayal, I was hurt by the fact that Jenny allowed someone to narrate my absence. Because Megan didn't just seduce Jenny, she occupied a space that should have been mine, and Jenny believed that narrative, believed that I was less present, less attentive, less warm. That hurt more than any hidden kiss. As this thought took hold, I heard light footsteps behind me and reflexively turned around. It was the new neighbor, the woman who had moved into the building next door weeks before, always accompanied by her noisy dog. She approached slowly, perhaps noticing my state, and asked if everything was all right. I almost said yes, because that's what we say reflexively and to avoid questions, but this time I didn't have the energy for social lies. I just nodded silently. She didn't insist, but sat on a nearby bench, allowing company without intruding. A simple, human, rare gesture. Kiko chirped softly, as if approving her presence, and for the first time that night, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to face everything completely alone. We stayed there for a few minutes. No one said anything, But that shared silence made something inside me realign a little, as if an internal peace had returned to its right place. When I finally got up to leave, she just smiled gently, like someone who understands that sometimes people just need to exist in the same space. I went home with Kiko already asleep on my shoulder, and when I entered, the apartment still carried Jenny's echo, but it no longer seemed so suffocating. The pain was there, deep, latent, but there was a small space of air between it and my heart, enough space to realize that I wasn't broken yet, not completely. In fact, I had been loving this woman for years, and then suddenly I find out that she's been deceiving me for months.
Lying to me for months and in a relationship with someone else, with a ring and everything. And it was in that space that I decided the next day would be different. Not better, not easier, just different. And sometimes that's enough to get started. I woke up before the sun, not because I was rested, but because my body seemed to have forgotten how to sleep peacefully. Kiko was still huddled on his perch, feathers slightly ruffled, breathing slowly in a way that always reassured me, and for a moment I just watched him, trying to remember that something in the world still existed without asking anything of me. The house didn't share that gentleness. It carried the scent of absence and a silence that came not from calm, but from expectation. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the weight of the previous night settling on me like a damp blanket. The betrayal had stopped being a shock and had become a presence, a shadow that followed me from room to room. I knew I would eventually have to face the practical side of it, talking to Jenny, deciding whether she would return for her things, and figuring out what to do with the remnants of what we still shared. Bills, plans, promises, memories. But the conversation wasn't what scared me. What terrified me was knowing that nothing we said would change the fact that trust had been broken. I got up, went to the kitchen, and made coffee automatically, repeating old habits as if they might bring life back to its old shape, but nothing did. Everything that once belonged to us now felt like it belonged only to me. I set the mug down, took a deep breath, and decided I needed air again, but this time I needed movement. I put on a thin jacket, placed Kiko in his travel perch, he protested, then accepted, and walked through the empty streets, lit by flickering streetlights, as if the city itself wasn't awake yet. The world felt suspended, holding its breath with me. Memories came in waves. Jenny laughing in the kitchen, hugging me from behind, waiting for me at the door after long trips. The painful irony was that the same person who once gave me security was now the source of my deepest insecurity. I stopped outside a small cafe that opened early for morning workers. I didn't go in. I didn't want to be seen as vulnerable. I just watched the slow movement inside. Steam rising, tired smiles, people who had no idea my world had flipped overnight. Then my pocket vibrated. One buzz, a message. My heart froze. I knew it was her. I took out my phone with a trembling hand and saw the words, "Can we talk? Jenny." Simple. Quiet. And somehow that simplicity hurt more than anything else. I stood there as the world shrank around me. Kiko let out a soft, uneasy hiss. I closed my eyes and realized I wasn't afraid of talking to her. I was afraid of what the conversation might reveal about me. My ability to forgive, or my ability to walk away. I replied, "Yes, but not now. I'll let you know." I sent it before doubt could change my mind, and a small weight lifted, as if setting a boundary gave me back a piece of my voice. I walked toward the park, the same bench as last night, the place where I had realized that pain didn't erase who I was. I sat, let Kiko climb onto my shoulder, and stayed silent, just existing. And for the first time since the confession, I understood something. I didn't need to decide everything today. I didn't need immediate answers. I didn't need to solve years of history in one morning. I just needed to breathe, to live the next minute, and then the next. Kiko lightly pecked my ear, as if agreeing, and I smiled for the second time since everything fell apart. When I finally stood to go home, I felt a thin thread of strength inside me. Fragile,
almost invisible, but real. And sometimes thin threads hold up entire structures. I'll continue this story in the next video. Look at the card on the screen to see who showed up in our backyard. Things weren't going very well, so many negative surprises these past few days, and you won't believe who had the nerve to show up on our house. You really won't believe it. Keep watching to see the next video. See you there.